Vietnam War. Why the US media organs are guilty. The Vietnam War ended on the 30th April 1975. Many Americans still believe that the US media made them anti-war. The truth is that the US media neither lashed out at the war nor encouraged Americans to protest. Yet many Americans still blame the US media for losing the Vietnam War, simply because they cannot accept the US could lose a war to a poor nation. Yet lauding the media men for whatever role they played is reacting in excess or reacting in error. Worse, such reactions create needless illusions about the US media as facilitators of anti-war sentiment. Most Americans are thus still ignorant about America's negative roles in many countries. Not surprising, because the US media organs continue to rely on official press releases on wars in Iraq, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. That is not all. The US runs its military operations out of civilian departments in nearly 80 nations. While talking about the US military action, it is still secondhand reporting. Departments in Pentagon just take dictations. Reporting the Vietnam War was no different. All through 1964, the U.S. media organs reproduced fake White House claims on North Vietnamese attacks on U.S. Navy. This was deceit, yet the Congress relied on these reports to pass the Tonkin Gulf Resolution. The resolution green-flagged the war in Vietnam. The U.S. media platforms were guilty of starting the war. This was nothing but peddling absolute lies as true reports. The U.S. media arms were responsible for escalating the war and killing millions of Americans and Vietnamese. None of the offending media organs ever published any correction or clarification. The fact is that the U.S. media arms failed to do their job. Had they done it, the war in Vietnam would have come to an end much earlier. The U.S. newspapers never wrote demanding withdrawal of troops from Vietnam. Worse, Vietnam War reports were largely devoid of human interest. The U.S. media mouths never bothered to report about deaths in Vietnam with the sensitivity they deserved. There were too many reports of war actions than war pains. Only the television seemed to do its job by taking the Vietnam War to American living rooms. Yet that was an illusion. Even television networks showed war news that suited the warmongers in Washington. TV networks ran down the enemy in the north, dehumanizing them desperately. They called the North Vietnamese and the Viet Congs vermins. So, TV networks had a bigger role in the war. Sans them, the US troops in Vietnam could not have reached 500,000 by 1967 end. Undeniably, American TV encouraged a decisive majority of viewers to back the war. Equally, the U.S. media platforms avoided stories on atrocities committed by American troops. Even as anti-war sentiment peaked, no one in the U.S. media questioned America's so-called right to aggression. The U.S. media called the aggression defense and refused to acknowledge that the U.S. was stuck in stalemate. The U.S. scribes were still bent on calling American politicians who carried on with the war as honorable people. The tragedy is that in the process, the U.S. media ended up defending wrong actions of wrong men. Worse, twisted narratives about the Vietnam War were masquerading as warnings for the next war. No American president has ever given an honest account of the Vietnam War to date. Even today, the U.S. media men say it was a mutual war, not a war ordered by the United States. The United States still believes there is no need to apologize for the war in Vietnam. No American politician has acknowledged so far the great lessons the Vietnam War has for the U.S. Reason why Afghanistan happened in 2010. Reason why Ukraine is brewing in the Great American War Laboratory. Reason why the U.S. is enabling the killings of innocent Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Yet no U.S. media organ has questioned the so-called prerogative of the U.S. to militarily impose its will on the world. The Vietnam War is now a lasting symbol of the U.S. falsehood and the U.S. media's complicity in perpetuating those lies. Clearly, the U.S. media made Americans accept and back a war in Vietnam that was not theirs. American media discovered to its delight that it was so easy to hoodwink the U.S. audience.